Today, we're sitting with some interesting guests. Something's happened on one of the groups that we are part of, that we've been hosting in that. And so we've decided to have a bit of a chat with some important people to educate the followers, the artists, and to give some general information about copyright issues and so forth. Lorena's from the Art Challenge with Friends. Lorena is also a very talented artist. So funny enough, all three guests over here are superbly talented artists. But Lorena's from the Art Challenge, and we're going to be hosting this little session over here. Lorena?
Thank you, Graham. Good morning.
Morning.
Yes. So how this came about is that we host an art challenge bi-weekly. We give the members a topic to paint from, be it a still life or something like that. And so every second week they submit what they have painted from the challenge. But what we are finding is that a number of people don't understand that they can't go and copy somebody else's work. So although they think, oh, okay, I'm going to paint a still life, they'll go onto a site, perhaps Pinterest or wherever, and, find a picture that appeals to them and paint what they see, because this artist that they've seen inspires them and it looks lovely and it makes them feel good. But they don't realize the implications of copying another artist's work.
Yes.
So that's how this talk came about.
Okay. Cezanne is also one of the artists. She's one of the Art Canvas Factory's customers, funny enough, as well. And I reached out to Cezanne and I said to her, this is the situation that's happened. Would you be able to help us? Cezanne, tell us about yourself.
Thanks, Graham, and thanks for having me to chat a little bit about this. So part artist, part corporate lawyer. That's why I'm here. And yeah, I think it's having the benefit of being a lawyer and also an artist. I immediately think of art as a business as well, as soon as you start going from hobby to commercializing. And so when we spoke about this, I think that's intrigued me as well, because it's an opportunity to broaden the education for up-and-coming artists or well-established artists who need a little bit of information, because I think wearing your artist hat, you don't necessarily think about all the risks. You think about creating, you think about being creative and sharing your work, and you don't necessarily think about the rules that may impact your body of work or the space that you work in. So happy to come on board and share some thoughts.
Great stuff. So this incident was highlighted when a famous South African painter's artwork landed up on the page, and yeah, we reached out to Ronald and said to him, we're very sorry about what's happened, but also, would you be able to join us over here, Ronald?
Hi, good morning, guys. Thank you so much for the invitation. I appreciate it. I feel a bit unqualified. All I know is what I do behind the canvas. I suck at life in general. I'm really bad at admin. I'm really bad at checking things up. I'm hyper creative, but I lack the admin skills, and I depend on the offset of copyright that is given or imparted to the artist when he creates that. For me to go and check up what is that, it's just a daunting task for an artist. We believe that in general there is a copyright given to us when we create something unique.
Okay.
I bargain on that. I've never gone and copyright a work specifically. So that's why I sit a lot with these problems. And
okay, but now that brings us up to a good point. Cezanne, what is copyright?
Yeah, and I think, Ronald, you made an interesting point. That you're not copyrighting your work. So copyright is a subset of intellectual property. It's a type of intellectual property. And that's the first thing to know. The second thing to know, to your point, is that copyright vests automatically once you've created your artwork in a tangible form, right?
Yep.
So once you've actually got your painting on canvas and you've signed it, or however you choose to do it, automatically that is copyrighted. You don't need to, and I need to caveat this, you don't need to, in South Africa, take any further steps like registration. So that's the first thing. The second thing then, following on when it comes into existence, is how long it endures. And copyright in South Africa endures for the lifetime of the artist plus 50 years.
Oh.
Again, you don't need to do anything. It automatically comes into existence. It is there. And as soon as someone then copies your work, you've got rights that have been infringed, and you can naturally step into those rights and take further action if you wanted to.
Can I just ask something? That the thing is, what about the reproduction of those works? Even after 50 years, if I die and I give my rights over to my children, the original lapse to copy that, and that is what students do at in all the big galleries in Europe. They sit there and they copy the work, and that is how they practice. There's not a problem with that. But the reproduction of the work, prints, for instance, I'm sure it's not included in that 50 years, because that is, the reproduction is something else than the original.
Correct.
Because
Correct.
otherwise, in 50 years, anybody can print anything from me and generate income from it. So we're talking about not reproduction, the prints, but actually the painting, that somebody can copy that after 50 years completely and sell it as original.
Well, no, that's what I'm saying. It's a little bit more complicated than that.
Okay.
Yeah. And,
All right.
and you know,
But they are allowed to copy it.
You're allowed to copy it.
Yeah.
Because I think, like Lorena was saying, or you were saying, copying is a way of practicing and so forth and so on. It's effectively creating a derivative work, right?
Yeah.
Because it's derived from an original painting, but it's still not original, right? In order for the artwork to be protected by copyright, it needs to be original. It needs to be your original thought process. It needs to be your original creation. And that's where it sometimes goes a little bit pear-shaped, because people don't necessarily get the consent of the original author. They don't necessarily reference. If they didn't get the consent, they don't necessarily reference that this was derived from a particular work. And that's where it gets murky, because they're out in social media, they're out in trying to commercialize what they've developed, but it's not their original work. And they've actually breached copyright law and breached the rights of the original artist. So that's important. Derivative work is allowed naturally, because everybody's going to reference. I mean, I think we all get inspired by different artists when we create.
Yeah, definitely.
But the important thing to remember is that either you need to get the consent prior to going out into the world and saying, I created this, or you need to reference it. And Ronald, in your scenario, what I was thinking about this morning was one way to commercialize on something like that. If you're comfortable for someone to have created something substantially similar to yours, is to give your consent, but to monetize it, right? My consent comes with a price.
Cezanne, can I ask a question? If, for instance, like our group, where, we've got artists of all levels, some are just painting for the fun of it, and they join our challenge because they want to have a little bit of practice at something. So let's say they go onto Ronald's site and they see a picture that particularly appeals to them. They say, oh, I want to try this. I like this guy's technique and I want to give it a bash. If they then do a similar copy and they then post it into our group, if that person says, this was inspired by Ronald West or after Ronald West, is that okay? Because they've referenced that person, they're not putting it out there to sell particularly. It was just, this person inspired me. Is that okay? So if in other words, if they acknowledge where they got this inspiration from,
yes. Yes.
So I just want to make that clear. You know, if there is a piece of artwork out there that you think, oh, I need to try this, then give the artist credit where credit is due.
Absolutely. And that's the important thing, right? So you may not necessarily have obtained the consent before, but you are referencing and acknowledging the artist. So you're not saying, this is my bright, unique idea at all.
Yes.
So you're not in breach of the copyright, and you haven't infringed the rights of the original artist. Anybody who then comes along onto the Facebook page, if I come along onto the Facebook page and I see, oh, wow, this is really fantastic, I need to get in touch with the person who did this. But when I see the post, immediately I'm alerted to the fact that this is a derivative, it's a piece of reference work, and I then go to the Ronald West Gallery site, for example, because that's the original artist. And that's the important thing practically. If the reference wasn't there, I wouldn't know that it's a derivative work. I wouldn't know who the original artist was or is. And I would immediately assume that what I'm seeing is an original piece of work. And that's why it's so important when you are copying work, when you are trying techniques, etc., to stay on the right side of the law and the right side of copyright law, is to reference the artist. Whoever deserves the credit gets the credit. You know, if there's a collaboration between, sorry, Graham, between teacher and student, you know, again, you know, there's got to be the relevant references. And oftentimes we do find that the student is never referenced. You know, teacher goes off and puts the work out as if it is his or her original work. And that in itself causes difficulty. And so there's got to be an abundance thinking about how we do this in the art world.
Exactly what you're mentioning. I read it this morning. Let me just find it here. Give me 1 second. Not this one. That was this one, yeah. Yeah. No, not that one. Rembrandt. So this is one of his famous paintings, The Polish Rider. And then they did a project in the 1980s claiming it was a pupil of Rembrandt. And the question is, if the picture is so great and so beloved, does it really matter who painted it? Exactly what you're saying. The teacher left the room and put it out, and people have thought that this could possibly be the students and not the teachers.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, there's a lot of fear in this. There's a lot of fear. And I mean, Ronald, you know, Lorena, you are well-established artists. You know, Ronald, you in particular. And, you know, for me as an up-and-coming artist, there's this huge weight of imposter syndrome. There's this huge fear of what I'm creating, and I'm feeling it very deeply, but how is it going to be perceived by others? Is it going to be really worth my time? You know, there's so much doubt involved. And so when you finally put out a piece of work that you put your heart and soul into, you're still very doubtful and you're fearful, right?
I still am after 21 years.
Ronald, you're giving me no comfort. So there's
it's a good humility thing, I think, built into creativity, is that you always doubt yourself. And it's good because it brings out the best in you.
But the thing is, so you're saying it's good and it brings out the best in you. For someone else, that imposter syndrome makes them copy work that they deem to be really good and what the world has said is really good. So in order for them to sort of address that doubt and fear, they go the copy way. And, you know, again, there's a bit of work to be done on the psyche with that. And I think, you know, there's a lot of work that we as artists have to do on ourselves in order to create and put work out. And I think part of what you know, schools of thought and Facebook pages and whatever we share, you know, like I said, I think it needs to be collaborative, where we do share. Guys, instead of going on the other side of the law because you're fearful that your work is not going to be good enough, perhaps you need to change the narrative for yourself. But I mean, I'm talking wishful thinking type stuff. But I do think that that's also where people start. And think of a Rembrandt, you know, the student has surpassed the master. That's not okay, you know. So I'm not going to give credit, no matter how good I am, no matter how lauded I am by the world out there. I'm still, you know, holding on to it. And I can't give credit, no matter how small, because it's going to take away from my mastery.
Okay, so I'm gonna now start a painting next week, and I reached out to Ronald, and I've said, you know, I like your style. Can I copy one of your paintings? And Ronald says yes. Do I go and put my painting forward in Ronald's style and sign my name on it, or do I not put a name on it, or do I just underneath a blurb put over there inspired by Ronald?
I think that the correct approach, and I'm just taking it from myself if I had to do that, would be to sign your own name.
Okay.
But with consent by the original artist.
So you don't forge Ronald's name underneath yours?
Not a good idea.
Okay.
Sorry, I just wanted to ask Ronald directly. So, Ronald, when you have a situation like this where somebody has copied your work and put it up as their own, how does this impact you? How do you feel? And I know when we spoke one-on-one, you had some strong views, and I want you to express those views so people know how you feel when you find out about this sort of thing.
My problem is the people that are really talented that copy, because I look at it when I just scroll, and I can catch the colors, it's mine or the theme, but then it looks like either a bad copy or I had a bad day. And when you zoom in, you see, oh, it's somebody else. So especially when people sell it, I've seen that as well. It looks like just a bad Ronald West. And that is my problem, except the monetary loss when they sell it. It's just that it doesn't reflect good, unless if they've just put kudos or I've been inspired by, it's great. You usually compliment the people, and if they really want to go one-on-one, I'll even tell them what to do with their brush strokes and that. But even they just have to say inspired by whoever. So that is the one problem I have, and I do have clients that find a problem with it because they're paying a lot of money for the creative side or the uniqueness, and now all of a sudden they see stuff popping up which is really close to mine.
Cezanne, can I bring up the topic of photographs? So we've spoken primarily about copying art, but we also have in the background where artists, they might be given, say in our case, a challenge, and the challenge would be to paint a cheetah. Okay, so a lot of artists don't have the equipment or the time or perhaps the money to go out to a national park and take photographs of cheetah if they come across one. So they merely look on the internet and they find a beautiful picture of a cheetah and they paint that photograph. What are the consequences? What should they be doing to not get themselves into trouble by copying a photograph from a photographer?
For me, it's the same thing as another artwork that's in tangible form. So that photograph, the copyright vests with whoever took that photograph, right? Whatever, if there's a print or an artwork created from that, we again in the zone of derivative work. So in exactly the same way that you would reference an artist of what artwork that you're referencing, you've got to do exactly the same thing. Get the consent of the person, or say this was, you know, reference photograph taken by so-and-so, if you can find who took the photograph. But it's exactly the same principle. And naturally, we wouldn't think about it in the same way because it's a photograph versus artwork. But it is derived from that original work. So therefore, we've got to treat it in the same way.
I think what we've discussed today has been incredibly helpful and an eye-opener. And Cezanne, thank you very much for detailing what a lot of us don't know. And I hope this is going to inspire and help artists, photographers to do the right thing and to make themselves more educated. I think it's up to the public to educate themselves as well in terms of what is copyright and where does one infringe and not infringe. And thank you very much. And Ronald, thank you as well for coming onto this meeting and giving your point of view. It's very eye-opening and inspiring to the rest of us. And thank you for your patience, for everybody that copies and admires your artwork. I think it's tough, but thank you so much for joining us today.